This is an opportunity to really rethink organizational structures, to rethink accountability and ownership. And of course, there is a new complexity of adding AI.
I don't know about you, but I don't know very many people that are hopeful about the world of work. And I'd like to change that. My name's Marcus Mossberger, and I started the Hope at Work podcast, where you'll find two things. Number one, really interesting guests. And number two, innovative ideas about the future of work. Check it out.
AI workers into the mix. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Meg and Amy show. Meg, hello. How are you today?
Hey, Amy. I was just thinking, are we the Bert and Ernie show, the Meg and Amy show? We need to like get our tune going.
Mm-hmm. What's our letter of the day?
Oh my goodness. Letter of the day is probably J for joy. How about that?
Joy. I was going to say W for windsurf.
Oh, yes. The windsurf situation.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about this windsurf situation.
Yeah, so there's a lot of chatter going on right now about what I think of is a sort of a bigger thing, of course, as I always do. But over the weekend, windsurf was kind of acquired by Google, but kind of not. So they did an investment, they took a bunch of people, but then they left the shell of the company and the existing windsurf behind. And most of the talk is about how this is a path to focus on speed versus efficiency of investment. And it's really a path to get around long, drawn out regulatory steps that get in the way of that innovation. But I think, at least from where I'm looking at that, I think we're in a really interesting place. We've been for a while in a place where venture-based startups were getting bigger and bigger, but not IPOing and not exiting. And now we're in a situation where AI-based startups are having multiple different outcomes that we wouldn't have seen or imagined decades before, whether they're exiting early to the bigger foundation models, whether they're thinking about the founders moving on. Again, all of this stuff just tells you there's a lot going on and a lot of change and a lot of transition. So it's super interesting to watch. And I think a little bit jarring, both for people that have been doing this for a long time and for people that are working in startups, to recognize that they don't fully comprehend what the outcome of their shares might be. So yeah, big times.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just wild that there were two acquisitions in like 2 days of the same company.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really, really wild. But yeah, reading a little bit more about it, that, Google's acquisition was really about being able to do the acquisition, because if they had gone full tilt into acquiring windsurf, then there would be all sorts of regulatory blockers and so on from them being able to do it. But how bizarre to take some of the leadership and leave the rest of the company. But it worked out very nicely. I think that they're going to cognitive. It seems like a good fit. So I don't know. Good for all them.
It's hard to know, but it's definitely, like, again, hidden option D that we might not have realized was out there.
Yeah.
Just encourages us all to be a little bit more on our toes about what to expect next.
Mm-hmm. And curious about possibilities too.
Absolutely. And I do think that there's, the arc over the last couple of days has been a lot about angst and, oh my gosh, what about the people left behind? But to your point, who are we to say this might work out great for everyone? And it might not, but isn't that the whole definition of a startup and innovation right now? So I think keeping your eye on the prize of what are you learning? What are the possibilities of that? And are you expanding your own contribution, your own skills, your own awareness of what is available in the market today. I think those are all really great skills. So I think it's something we can all learn from.
All right. Well, we have quite the meaty topic today. So how about if we sponge?
All right. Nerd alert, everyone.
A few episodes ago, we talked about how business models are shifting as evidenced by changes in pricing models, identified by our very own Meg Bear. And that was quite the conversation. But what we're also seeing emerging fast and furious in recent weeks is a shift in thinking about organization models and organizational design. So let's dive into this topic today. So first, there's no secret that lean organizations enabled by AI are all the rage right now, right? So you've got startups like Gamma was just had a case study where, even though they've got huge ARR and everything, they've only hired 28 people, and they're really maximizing the impact of every single person, right? And so that's on one end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have all of these larger organizations, tech or not, that are, recognizing that they need to fuel their workforce with AI, and they're making cuts in their workforce because of AI, kind of, sort of, but all with this mindset of like, how do we streamline our organization so that we can move faster? What are you thinking, Meg, about this trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, I've been curious about this for a while, and I do think that we are at the very beginning. So my first inclination is to remind us all that when we see a trend like this that is emerging but not fully clear exactly how big it's going to go, this is a really important time to not only invest in curiosity, but to also invest in flexibility, because what that means is that you're going to probably have to adapt more than once. So when I think about the lean push, I see it across a couple things. First, I see it as a little bit of shareholder, board, and C-suite FOMO, right? That you need to figure out how to keep up with the leading organizations. And so there's going to be a lot of energy and push to how do we have more efficiency? How do we get more value creation? How do we drive up the top line and reduce the bottom line with AI? And all of that is, I think people sort of get it, and it's taking on a life of its own. The thing that I think is most interesting in this moment is there is a real opportunity in the way that organizations are structured. If you start to imagine that you have more AI agents in your world, if you start to imagine that you have smaller organization sizes doing more, whether you have smaller overall or just smaller groups doing bigger and more things, I think there's an opportunity to unlearn some of the organizational behaviors that we've had in the past, specifically around the complexity of communication, the complexity of workflow, and the complexity of how we think about seniority, right? We tend to think of large organizations as a proxy for seniority, value, or a little bit of prestige. And the truth is, the new indicators of high value, high prestige, and even high pay are going to be the people that can figure out how to do more with less.
So there was an article that came out, I think just in the last few days, that really struck a chord with both of us. So it was called "Your Business Model Didn't Break, Your Org Chart Did" by CJ Gustafson. And, he's taking a look at this from kind of the large organization perspective. And, some of the things that he shared in this article is that, as you are scaling from an outside or inside perspective, it seems like you're growing linearly, but really your org chart is growing geometrically. and your org communication complexity, like you were just talking about, Meg, is growing exponentially. And so, a 10-person startup, he says, has 45 potential lines of communication. But once that company scales to a 100-person company, then suddenly that becomes nearly 5,000 lines of communication. So it's really interesting when we layer this particular article on top of some of these other things that we've been looking at. What really struck you when you were looking at this article?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. So back to the way we talked about pricing shifts is a kind of a cheat code indicator of the entire business model changing. I actually tend to find that for me, a cheat code of a real structural shift happens when I observe different functional areas kind of coming to a similar topic. And in this case, what was so interesting about this article and a few other articles that I've read of CJ's work is focused on CFOs and thinking about how M&A integration can oftentimes fall down because of lack of clarity and lack of alignment that happens when you don't get the organization model properly aligned and correctly defined. So people don't have clarity of what they're responsible for and what they are owning. It's very hard for them to be successful in a large organization. And that particular problem is just a different entry point to this idea that organization models are really, really changing. So again, when I see different functions coming at a similar topic and pointing to a similar root cause problem, I believe that that's an indicator that this isn't just a fad. This isn't just we need a chief digital officer because we are rolling out e-commerce. This is something that is actually going to be substantially impacting business as we progress in this AI world of ours. And so it causes me to want to dig deeper into what behaviors do we need to change today to get ready to think about org design more structurally, and how can we get better at recognizing when and how those changes need to happen? Because not everything that you can see coming requires you to make a massive change to your teams and your orgs today. But if you don't understand the kind of core principles of this, you're going to truly be surprised when the entire definition of a high functioning organization changes out from underneath you.
So I think that the need to redesign organizations and to really focus on organizational design, do process reengineering, all of these things that are bubbling up right now, this has always been necessary. And of course, we've always done reorgs and we've always done this and that. But it's a little different right now, right? It's a little bit different because there's so much panic happening with regards to, human versus AI workers, how to take advantage of that, how to not lose your shirt over it, how to make sure that you're not leaving people behind. I mean, there's just so much wrapped up in this. And so making sure that we are being very thoughtful about that organization design is critical right now. But there's also so much risk associated with it too. So regardless, when we look at CJ's article, so much of it rings true, right? So we've been in big organizations and we felt all of that like communication friction, all of that complexity of organizations where people are duplicating tasks and functions and decisions and all of that kind of stuff it's really super overwhelming. And so I felt like it hit a nerve for me. However, what the article doesn't do, and maybe we can start to figure it out, is, well, how do you actually measure if an organization is of high quality? How do you measure if the communications are being streamlined and not exponentially, getting more complex? It's not enough to just say, hey, we need to cut our staff by 90% so that we have fewer lines of communication, right? Like that's not really a viable solution for most organizations. So how do we go about doing the redesign, and how do we measure whether we're doing a good job at the redesign?
So two things. So first, I just want us to remind ourselves it's not one redesign. It is going to be an ongoing proficiency of how to identify and capture places where organization shifts will propel you in a better way for the context that you're living in. And the reason I bring that up is because I think exactly this is where we're very vulnerable. We're going to say, oh, we'll design for AI future, and we'll have somebody in charge of AI that, maybe reports to the CEO and maybe is in charge of finding all these optimization opportunities across. And then we'll, figure out within each function what their quota is, whether that's what their pound of flesh or whether that is what their expectation to the top or bottom line is, et cetera, et cetera. And don't get me wrong, like all that's going to happen and all of that is fine. It's fine, but it's not winning in my mind. What's winning in my mind is when we start to build the infrastructure for an organization that is going to evolve pretty dramatically. And we build that infrastructure both culturally, readiness to shift, as well as operationally, which is your point, managing the risk of that shift and not losing sight of what the real outcomes that matter. So this is all very nice and abstract, but it requires a lot of practical heavy lifting underneath it all. Number one, again, first rule is admit you have a problem. So I think this is like where I think it's useful for everybody to get aligned by that. But secondarily, I think the way that you would want to measure progress is first and foremost making sure that at the executive suite level, you are really, really aligned on what's changing in your business and where the bar has moved. Again, if we don't start having conversations about the bar has moved, the expectation is not incremental, but dramatic shift. And the way that we're serving our customers is probably going to shift as well. So really spending time at the executive team level to brainstorm and align on what is it that's changing about our business? Not how do we do our jobs, not is my function good and yours sucks. What is changing about our business that we together need to really get aligned on? And how are we going to measure the progress that we're making towards that change? And again, my strong recommendation is that we measure it based on the opportunity capture that we're trying to do. Because if we measure it on just cost reduction, we're going to be kind of in a race to the bottom. What is the opportunity capture for your business? How does the executive team agree or disagree about what that opportunity capture really is? And then what is the organization that you need to move towards to realize that opportunity capture?
This is giving me memories of our wonderful chat with Jen Morrow a few weeks back, and how she talked about, getting alignment on the problem to start with. And that's right. That's
and what's the story,
a good use
right?
of time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's the story? Again, the key difference, I think, is also making sure that as a leadership team, you start introducing the language of agility and of adapting over time, because I don't think any leadership team has the full picture today. And so putting that pressure on yourself is going to basically guarantee your bike shedding forever. So instead of waiting for this perfect clarity, I think it is one of these things that needs to become a behavioral, cultural part of your annual planning, where you say, all right, what has changed about our opportunity? How are we positioning ourselves to capture that opportunity?
And so, do you think that there are any metrics that we currently, track or talk about that measure org effectiveness, or anything in this realm? You've talked and written about revenue per employee before as being a good, at least, proxy to understanding how well your business is doing, comparatively, et cetera. Do you think that is a good measure now, or in this realm? I mean, obviously it's a good measure, but is it a good measure in this realm, or do we need something different?
Well, I think it's a important component, but not the only one. I also tend to really care a lot. So back to our conversation with Jen about, getting alignment on the story. And Jen made a comment that lines up very well with how I think of it, which is I usually feel like the mission is clear to people when I hear them explaining it to each other, not when they echo it back exactly what I've said. And so putting in expectation at all of the different leadership levels that people can really articulate what is your story, what is the opportunity that you're going after. It's always a good idea to make it aspirational and forward-looking as opposed to just something that is more of the same, because it doesn't inspire people if there's not some stretch involved. And making sure that people are not just parroting, but can tailor and clarify what does that mean for their particular function or their particular group. So elevating the expectation of that alignment with evidence that that alignment is not just in your head, but is showing up in how people lead. So again, I think the quantitative metrics are: what is your growth on your top line? What is your revenue per employee, EBITDA per employee? Those are all places that I think everyone needs to be grounded in. And then some of the more interim milestone-y kind of measures is: how are we seeing the value opportunity reflected back to us in the different functions and at the different levels? Because until you start feeling that, you're not going to have an organization that's primed for adapting to the future. They're just going to be really committed to the past.
Got it. Okay, so there's another article that I think is a nice companion to CJ's. And this is on thepeerdom.com, and it is growth leads to specialization, right? And so what this was talking about was that, in the olden days, everyone was kind of a generalist, and as we have, and certainly like in early startups and so on, people are generalists, but then quickly we've moved to specialization, part of the Industrial Revolution. And then as we grow, everyone starts to specialize. But now what we're seeing is that because of the gift of AI, people can be much more generalists, right? We saw Nick Mehta, another guest of ours, also wrote a blog post about how he sees people owning kind of end-to-end functions now and not being so siloed. And this is an opportunity to really rethink organizational structures, to rethink accountability and ownership. And of course, there is a new complexity of adding AI workers into the mix. So what do you think, Meg, is going to be really critical in terms of moving? Because I think this is a critical component of organizations moving to this, the existing organizations moving to this more effective org structure. So what do you think is going to be necessary for leaders to move in this direction?
Yeah. So first off, let's just go with the sort of like optimism, invent the future piece of this. I truly believe this unlocks real opportunity for every individual to not only contribute more, but to learn more and to grow more quickly. Those of us that have worked in startups, especially early in your career, I think you get intuitively when you have less discipline that's focused and siloed, you tend to learn more about why you're doing what you're doing. You tend to get better first principles understanding, and you just build more skill because you have no choice. So I think on the plus side, we are at a really important and useful moment if we tell ourselves the right story, which is when we apply curiosity, adaptability, and a growth mindset, we are likely to have more opportunities presented to us than we've ever had before. Now, those people that really thrive in repetition and doing work exactly the same way and very highly governed and repetitive work, those people that think about workflows as things you build once and use forever in the same way, it's going to be significantly discomforting because you're going to struggle with what's expected of you in this new way of working. So I think that for anybody who is eager to grow, I think this we've got an amazing moment in time to capture this. But it is going to come at a cost, especially to people who have built up years and years of expertise in disciplines and functions that are going to be different and changing quite rapidly. So I think this is the way to sort of think about where the opportunity is and how we as individuals should think about how we build our skill and how we sign up and participate in where this future is taking us.
I love that. So I think one of our very first, maybe it was the first episode, we talked about Microsoft's frontier firms and this new notion of, where companies are going. And they introduced the concept of, hey, maybe we're moving away from org charts and towards work charts, which becomes really interesting when we start to talk about, having people have more ownership and lots of different kinds of tasks that they're responsible for, but maybe they're actually, being done by AI and they have oversight to AI and all of this kind of stuff. So I'm wondering, what does that look like? Are we talking about like accountability matrices, which honestly, like that, just the concept of that makes my skin crawl. So I'm wondering, in order to really take advantage of all of this, you need to get really micro in terms of tasks and what tasks AI can do and what tasks humans are doing and how you distribute them and how you generalize people and all this kind of stuff. And so you have to get kind of nitty gritty, and you want everything documented and visible so that it can be reviewed, it can be adjusted, it can be, measured. So all of these things, but we're at risk of going too bureaucratic, too much detail, too much in the weeds. So how do we balance those two things, Meg?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the trick because in my experience, there are a lot of people that are going to want to immediately go and just drive a control mindset over the entire life cycle. And that is similar to you. I have a pretty significant allergy to that. In fact, most of the time when I hear people saying the words operating model, I find I start to break out in hives. And yet, like anything, I feel like there's a piece of that I'm wrong about, and there's a piece of that I'm right about. And I think figuring out the difference is life's journey for all of us. So The piece that I'm wrong about is that you do need a way to, and I mean, especially if you're thinking about bringing on automation or agents, you need a way to make sure you understand the inputs and outputs. Otherwise, you're going to have chaos, right? And there's a whole line of discussion about, at what point does it make sense to use large language models versus, traditional mechanisms for automation. But I think there's room and space and need for all of it. And I think that what we have been presented with is an opportunity to really be much more creative about what is possible in this world of AI. But I think that the bigger picture question really comes down to, we have to move away from the need of certainty and to a little bit more of the passion for discovery. And in order to do that, we do have to be clear about what we think we know, and also be flexible and comfortable with the fact that we are probably wrong for the new context. And so I think it's okay and important to look at the micro and to look at all of the different pieces. But I also think, again, if you're looking at that with an eye to saying, okay, now I understand it and everything from here forward makes sense, versus I have built the skill of understanding the first principles of my business. And so as things change, I will be better equipped to adapt going forward. So it's really that piece that I think is going to be the tension. And I think we're going to stumble our way into what that future really is, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I love that. It always goes back to first principles of the business.
Yes.
And yeah, that's super helpful.
Which is why it's so hard. Again, if you spent your time working in a very small piece and never having visibility into what's happening with the business, you're going to really, really struggle to figure out, well, what does that mean in the future? So again, this is a place for all of us to really invest more in not just understanding how we do what we do as a business, but also understanding what the customer value really is that we're offering and how that might change over time.
Yeah. Okay, so there's yet a third article that I want to bring forward as well. And so this is also from peerdim.com, and this is AI Native Organizations, the Next Evolution of New Work. And so this is really talking a lot about bringing AI workers into the organization, essentially. And so this is a bit of a controversial topic, right? People are a little resistant to think of AI agents as workers, and feel a little bit defensive about AI workers taking away jobs from human workers. From my perspective, I think we just kind of have to get over it a little bit, and look at possibilities and reality and all that kind of stuff. And we do, I think it's really important that we do think of them as workers, because they are producing and are completing tasks for us, and they need to be of high quality, and we need to measure them, and we need to make sure that that they're delivering the results that we need, that they're aligned to our business goals, etc. So obviously there are different skills that AI workers need, and things like not hallucinating and actually learning from mistakes and taking in feedback, human feedback, and all of that kind of stuff. But these are actually kind of skills that the AI workers need to learn. But now that we are thinking about a future where AI workers come into the organizational structure, this means that we have to think about like work relationships, right? What are the characteristics of different kinds of work relationships? And it's not just reporting relationships, but again, kind of accountability relationships, and how, maybe we're not maybe it's not so hierarchical. Maybe it's, some ad hoc squads and so on. So what do you think, Meg, are some of the key elements that people need to be thinking about in terms of bringing AI workers into their organizational design?
Yeah, so I like where you've been going with some of your thought pieces, Amy, about the focus on tasks versus entire jobs. I think that in the near term, the obvious place that we will all learn and grow and evolve on this topic is as we start carving off pieces of work that we can better manage and structure to play well to AI. Places, I mean, we've been doing this for a while. If you look at like what marketing teams have been doing with marketing automation, 20 years ago, it was very bespoke, and now, no one would handcraft a marketing campaign. It's all done with a large amount of automation underneath it and a whole lot of optimization as well. I think we can think about that evolution very similarly to a lot of the different types of tasks and roles that we have within the company. But I think there's also an element in the world where we start to get pressure for having leaner organizations and smaller numbers of people and maybe larger numbers of either fractional contractor or AI agents. Again, it really elevates the role of oversight, what a manager used to do. It actually makes it much more difficult on quite a few dimensions because now you have to deal with dimensionality you never had to deal with before. But on the other hand, it might actually unlock new types of managers because in the past, we always thought of the difference of a good manager and a bad manager was really how well you were able to cope with the people side of things, right? But now there's a new possible manager, which is how well can you cope with the automation side of things? And in this case, you could imagine a person that is really good at predicting and preventing and managing the things that can and do go wrong with technology and automation, but maybe you're not good at doing those same types of tasks with humans, because the things that go wrong with humans are very different than the things that go wrong with technology. So I think it actually opens up opportunity for entirely new types of functions. It also opens up a lot of room for exploring and experimenting. And I think that creates, again, for those of us that like change and doing new things, I think this is a great opportunity to really step up with creativity to say, what problems am I solving and who's best equipped to solve those problems? But again, I really encourage us to not just look at the problems you have today, but look at what is the opportunity capture that your business is really trying to position yourself to achieve.
All right. Well, we have a fresh question from a friend of the show. Here we go. My manager is now my peer. How do I navigate the awkwardness?
Ooh, yes. It's funny. I have thought about this from very, very early on, from almost every seat, and I think it's useful for you and I to talk about our own multiple ways we have been peers and managers and colleagues across our different careers. But it has always been true to me that it is very, very important to assume that everyone you work with could someday be your boss and could someday be your peer. It's just really good life advice. It is both a signal that things, opportunities adjust over time, and it also is a signal that relationships matter, and making sure those relationships are not so transactional that they only make sense based on a reporting hierarchy. So that's my like soapbox moment. Now, brass tacks about things to do when you maybe haven't been so proactive and you just are now faced with the actuality of either being promoted, so you're now a peer of your manager, or having some sort of organization change that shifted the roles. That I think it's very, very important, again, to remember that there's two sides of this. There is the sort of emotional ego side, and then there is the getting work done side. And I think both can be supported well when you truly care about both the business, the shared thing that you're working on together, and the other human. And that you're like, if that's true, then you're naturally going to signal that you have still the full respect and appreciation and intention to be a good partner for the person that used to be your boss but is now your peer. I think it's on you to do that. If you're the one that got, a step up opportunity, it's on you to show up with that respect and with that frankly, humility, and also, if at all possible, to give them credit, whether it's earned or not, for creating that opportunity for you. Because again, I think that really helps position the relationship. It doesn't always work, but it is always the right thing to show up with the right intention, because at the end of the day, that's the only part you can control.
Yeah, one of the things, well, many of the things that you said really rang true for me, but the statement of, work like everyone's your boss, or something along those lines, I think that is so important, and that is certainly the way that I look at things, in terms of making sure that you bring value to others, that you're serving others, serving stakeholders, and in a business way, of course, not like going and doing their dry cleaning or something, but but it's kind of that servant leadership in a sense, right? And I always tell everyone that no matter what our combination of roles was, you Meg Bear and me, Amy Wilson, I always worked for Meg, right? So. And that's, and maybe that's like a little exceptional compared to other people, but it certainly made it easier to actually report to you or to not report to you. It didn't really change anything, to be quite honest, right? So I was always looking to provide value to you. I was always listening to you for input, for feedback, for support. I was always looking to make your life easier, to make you successful, no matter what. And that is, like you said, that is about being a good partner. That is about all of that. And so if you look at your work relationships under that lens, then it really doesn't matter, who's reporting to who and who's a peer of whom. But I understand that it does absolutely sometimes get a little awkward and people's egos are hurt. And so making sure that whatever you do, you're not, further contributing to any sort of ego loss, because that can go very badly.
Yes. Yeah, it's just smart in general, but also at the end of the day, I think this goes into the category of treat others as you would like to be treated, and just be human first. Like, that's really the best advice professionally. Doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that you let yourself be walked on, but have a baseline of personal integrity that transcends organizational politics. It just plays for the long game so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. you might even be on a podcast with them in a few decades.
That's right. They may beg you to come join their podcast. You never know. Could happen.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up. So this was really very interesting, very timely. Lots of thinking about org design and work re-engineering going on in my brain right now and Meg's brain. So thank you so much for letting us share some of that. Personally, I learned a couple things, or I guess I was reminded by Meg that, the first and foremost thing is to know your business. That sounds really stupid and obvious when I say it, but it's easy to forget. It's easy to start thinking about where do we put chairs and how do we, organize tasks and how do we put this AI it's really easy to get into the weeds, and, having that sticker, that aligned executive team to make sure everyone knows exactly what it is that we are trying to accomplish, first and foremost is key. And to use that then to drive and to recognize that we have all sorts of abilities now to make our organization hum and to make it meet those business goals. What did you learn, Meg?
Well, first off, thank you for, again, having space for us to talk this through, because I think this is going to be one of those topics we need to come back to a few different times over the next couple of years, because I really believe it's going to come on us fast and furious. So I think, again, if I were wanting us to hold a few things true, first is we need to recognize the org models we have today, and God help me, the sort of operating models that we work under are all going to change. So the sooner we get a running start on that emotionally, we'll be better equipped to address that. And then secondarily, I think organizational leaders need to be really thinking more creatively about organization design. And I think building that proficiency and that curiosity is going to be a renewable and reusable skill. So again, I think this is a great time to be in business. I think it is a great time to be in leadership, but it is not going to behave against a pattern we've seen yet. It's going to be new and different. So getting yourself mentally prepared for that is great. And I think once we do that, we are going to really seize this as an opportunity to invent the future that we want to have. So I'm all in for it personally.
All right, everyone, please send your Leadership Corner questions in. We love to get them. And please do subscribe if you haven't already to the show, and spread the word.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
Yes. Hey, let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.